foot pace. These people a little. Okay, let's begin. First of all, I just want to thank the Friedenbergs for opening their home. It's certainly very much appreciated. And I was thinking actually just today that the Seder is really a time when we all sort of come together and enjoy family and enjoy meals together. And it's something that is something that they very much feel a part of the community and want to give back. And knowing that people's Seders are going to be enhanced by a night at the Friedenbergs, I think is very, very appropriate and very much appreciated. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to go through tonight, mainly go through the Sefer HaChinuch, which is a fascinating work. He has just a little preface of what this work is. He wrote it actually for his son's bar mitzvah, roughly, I think, about 1,000 years ago, a little bit less, several hundred years ago. He lived, I think, in the 1300s, right around there, give or take. And he was one of the Rishonim. He wrote this book as a bar mitzvah gift to his son. He wrote this book as a bar mitzvah gift to his son and went through all 613 mitzvahs in the order of the Chumash, parsha by parsha, each mitzvah in the parsha, and gave a brief overview of each mitzvah, what the mitzvah is, what he calls the root of the mitzvah, which is what we're going to look at tonight, and then some of the laws of the mitzvah, and then he moved on to the next mitzvah. And it's a fascinating work, really was focused on the laws mainly to give us some sort of overview of what it's all about. But as he did it, each mitzvah that he came to, he took a moment to explain the mitzvah a little bit to his son and give him something that he calls the shoresh of the mitzvah. This idea of shoresh literally means the root of the mitzvah, is a fascinating word in context. Talking about the reasons for mitzvahs in general is something we don't engage in so much. There's meaning, there's purpose, there's ideas, and that's really, I believe, the way he meant it is the way I heard of Gifter talking about this once, others in a recording. I mean, this was years ago that he spoke about it, but it was the famous recording. But the idea of a root is something which something grows out of. It's a root concept, a meaning, an idea that nourishes this activity, this particular mitzvah, where by doing this mitzvah, it lends meaning to our lives. And the mitzvah is sort of an outgrowth of this concept. That's the idea that he uses. And when he goes through the mitzvahs of the night of Pesach, he talks about each one. He talks about the shoresh of the mitzvah. He has 11 mitzvahs that he attributes specifically about the Seder. And each one, as we'll see, he basically says the same thing 11 times. At the end, he explains some of them he explains a little bit more, gives a slight different nuance of it. At the end of the 11, he takes a moment to say, now, if you're going to ask me why do we need 11 mitzvahs to accomplish the same purpose, and he gives a lengthy explanation, which I would like to focus on a little bit. So that's where we're going to go, and I think focusing on that explanation and that meaning will give us a very powerful insight into what we can glean from the Seder and how it really can, as I said, change our entire year, experience the past, and inspire our future. So the first mitzvah that he discusses, he starts with, it's the fifth mitzvah, and he's going in order of the Chumash. So Bris Milah comes first, that's in Bereshis. Get Anasha, the sinew with Yaakov, that's in Bereshis. Rosh Chodesh is before this. The fifth mitzvah he lists is the mitzvah of slaughtering the Korban Pesach, and this is actually in Parshas Bo, is where he goes through all this when we were commanded in Egypt to have the first Seder in Egypt. And he says the root of this mitzvah, or from the roots, not the only reason. And I'm sorry, I meant to preference one other important point. The reasons he's giving, obviously, it's something he's suggesting. He himself is very clear. It's not the only reason. In his introduction, it's not the only reason. It's not even necessarily a right reason. It's an idea that he has that he feels is a meaningful lesson we can glean, and understanding we can have of the purpose of the mitzvah. So it's an idea. I think we'll see some of them may have been somewhat relevant to the time that he lived in. They may not be as true nowadays as what he talks about. He talks about the conduct of the wealthy versus the nobleman versus the man on the street, which is definitely very different in America. We live in a very affluent society. Even the man on the street lives a very different life than they did the peasants in Europe, etc. But either way, we'll see what he says. But the first one he says, the roots of the mitzvah is why do we slaughter the Paschal lamb? Is in order that the Jewish people will always remember to remember the great miracles Hashem, may he be blessed, did for them in the Exodus from Egypt. We have this lamb thanking God for the miracles to remember that there were miracles, to remember that there's something to thank God for tonight. Something happened tonight in history, something significant, and we want to remember it. Mitzvah number 6 is the mitzvah to eat the lamb. And he says from the roots of the mitzvah is what we wrote about in its slaughtering, which is in order to remember the great miracles the Almighty did for us, that he took us out of slavery. It says slightly differently, but the same idea. We were slaves in Egypt, God did great miracles, and this great event took place, the Exodus from Egypt. Mitzvah number 7, we should not eat the Paschal lamb raw or cooked. Here he explains a little more, but says it's the same idea. It's written about it, slaughtering, remembering the miracle of the Exodus from Egypt. And he says, why specifically roasted? That's because the way of princes and nobility was to eat roasted meat specifically, because it's a good and tasty dish. When you roast the meat as opposed to cook it with other things, you get more of the taste of the meat. They would enjoy it more, and this was the common practice. But the rest of the nation, who weren't as wealthy, couldn't get as much meat on the table. Again, not really the same in our society as it was then. For most people, the little meat they could afford, they could only eat it if they cook it in order to literally have enough to eat, to fill up and satiate themselves. Because they only had so much meat. If they would have roasted it, eaten it by itself, they would come away hungry. So to have a full meal, that's they don't realize it, but sholent really is technically a poor man's dish. That's what it is. That they took everything, they had the potatoes and the beans and everything, threw it all into one pot, and the meat got the flavor into everything, and you had one nice tasty dish for Shabbos. It really was a poor man's dish. I mean, nowadays it's so much science that goes into it, especially that it's much more fancy, but that's where it started. And that was what they did. So roasting was something that poor people just didn't do. And we who are eating the lamb in order to remember how we went out to freedom, to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, the language we find by Har Sinai, by Sinai we got the Torah, Hashem says to be a Mamlechas Kohanim B'Goy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests, holy nation. So it's certainly appropriate, he says, V'adai ro'i lanu l'isnaig b'achilos dercheres v'saros. We should conduct ourselves in a manner of freedom and nobility, which means when we're eating it. So we should eat it in a way that the nobles eat it. Noblemen eat roasted meat, so we're going to eat this lamb roasted specifically, not cooked, not baked, not mixed with other foods, just roasted, because that is an act of nobility. And that's how we want to eat this lamb, because that's what it's signifying, how we had this miracle that took us from slavery to nobility, these miracles. And then he adds, and this is aside from an additional purpose, eating the roasted meat references the idea of haste, which we left Egypt, and we weren't able to wait until we cook in a pot. You put it over the fire, then you can immediately start roasting it. If you put it into a pot, you first have to boil the water. It takes an extra 20 minutes, whatever it is. Not a lot of time, and that's exactly the point. There was a haste, there was a rush, same thing as leavening the dough. Couldn't let the dough rise. It takes 18 minutes. It's already chametz, it's not matzah. They didn't have the 18 minutes. They didn't have the 10, 15, 20 minutes for the water to boil and then to cook. They just roasted it and took it with them. So it's eating it in a manner of haste. Granted, they ate the meat the night before. Wasn't exactly what they did, but acting in a manner of haste is a reminder that there was haste back then. Mitzvah 8 follows the same theme. That mitzvah 8 is not to leave over any of the Paschal lamb. You're supposed to finish it that night. Anything that's left over actually has to be burnt. And he explains, again, same thing as slaughtering, to remember the miracles of Egypt. Why don't we leave any of it over? Same thing as before. This is Kederach Malachim Besarim, ways of kings and nobles. They don't leave anything over from one day to the next. They're not worried what they're going to eat tomorrow. They never have leftovers because they don't need it. And therefore, God said that if anybody's left over, it should be burnt, indicating this is something we have no use for. We're going to have new food tomorrow. There was somebody, one of the celebrities, I forgot who it was now. I saw a whole video about this a few years ago. that she was extremely wealthy, and she started this habit that she never wore clothing twice. Every day she was a trendsetter and everything. She was always going shopping in bulk because she needed to, because every day she wore a different outfit. She was nice. She didn't burn it afterwards. She gave it to charity afterwards. And she would give it away, this clothing that was worn once. Obviously very stylish clothing. But people who are at a certain degree of wealth, certainly the food, they're not eating leftovers. So to indicate that, that's why this meat that's left over cannot be used. Yeah.
This is a good question. When he enumerates mitzvah 5, 6, 7, 8, are these like each one out of the 613?
Correct.
Or one with subcategories?
Well, the 613 are, each one does have subcategories.
No,
but these
are each the distinct ones out of the 613.
Correct. Yeah, he's listing these as separate mitzvahs, which is an important point. I should mention in the introduction that he's listing that there are different counts of what the 613 mitzvahs are. Everyone, there's different exactly what is the header mitzvah and what are the details of that mitzvah. How do you divide it? Some people will count 4 different laws as laws of one mitzvah, where others would count that as 4 distinct mitzvahs, and they'll count a different set of 4 as commemoratives of one mitzvah. But he counts all of these as distinct mitzvahs. And what Steve is pointing out is that some people may learn that you have a mitzvah to eat the Paschal lamb, and you should eat it roasted. Roasting is a detail of the mitzvah of eating it, not a separate mitzvah. He's learning it that they're separate mitzvahs. But yes, this is his count of the 613. But everybody agrees it is a law. Question of whether it's a mitzvah unto itself or simply a category of another mitzvah. Okay, so this is the 8th one is to understand that, like the kings of the earth, when they're done with it, they just throw it out because they have no use for it. And again, he says all of this is to remember and l'kvoa b'leiv, and to instill in our hearts that at this time, Hashem may be blessed, redeemed us from slavery, made us a free nation, and we merited royalty and greatness. So I understand the night is about royalty and greatness. The mitzvah number 9 is the cessation of chametz, hashpasas chametz, and he says from the roots of the mitzvah again is to remember the miracles that were in Egypt, as is written regarding the Paschal lamb. I assume he's referring to the haste over here. Yeah. Correct. It has to be eaten at night. Cannot be eaten during the day. Only that night in advance. So there is a debate in the Gemara, 2 opinions, whether or not one has to stop at midnight. There are 2 opinions about it. There is an opinion that there is a rabbinic law that anything has to be done by the morning. You have to finish by midnight so that you don't mess up and go a little bit too late or fall asleep and end up doing it in the morning. We make you do it by midnight. So there is a debate if there is such a rabbinic law. And that's actually why there's a discussion having the afikomen. You're supposed to have the afikomen ideally before midnight, because afikomen is the commemoration of the Paschal lamb that should really be eaten by midnight. Ideally, one should even really finish hollow by midnight, because hollow is part of the seder, part of the mitzvah of the night. That should all be by midnight, because you want, following that idea that there's a rabbinic law to finish it in the first half of the night, so you don't run too late. Biblically, one definitely has until the morning, until sunrise. But by rabbinically, there is an opinion that one should finish by midnight. Midnight is not 12 o'clock. We mean the middle of the night, which is usually, I think it's usually around 1 o'clock this time of year, but I'm not sure what it is this year. I haven't checked. Okay. So this is, so mitzvah number 9 again is following the same idea. Mitzvah number, yeah. What is chametz? What, from the word has a meaning, yes, and it talks about chametz and soor. It refers to specific things. Yes. What I'm putting here is a very brief excerpt. Some of these he runs for 3-4 pages explaining the details of the laws and where it comes from. He has in each one he has a short section where he explains a little bit of a meaning of the mitzvah. So for our purposes tonight, I just excerpted where he talks about the meaning, but the laws he goes to at length and he goes through the sources, and other people do as well, obviously. But that's it is an important question. In my own personal review of halacha, I happen to be reviewing right now what is and what is not chametz. It's a very complex body of law. Exactly at what point what mixtures are a problem, are not a problem. if it's food, if it's not food, when does it stop becoming food? Very, very complex area. Okay. Mitzvah number 10, number 6 is eating matzah. And again, he says that which is written regarding the Paschal lamb. Again, that's what he's referring to the haste. Mitzvah number 11, chabit not be found in our possession. He says again, from the roots of this mitzvah, we should always remember the miracles done for us with the exodus from Egypt, as we said by the Paschal lamb. And we'll remember that happened for us in this way, where because of the haste of leaving, we baked the dough as matzah. We couldn't delay until it would leaven, as it was written, and they baked the dough into matzos because they did not rise when they left. So again, it's all about the haste, and he spells it out over here. And mitzvah number 12 was not to have a chametz mixture. The roots of the mitzvah, we wrote of 11. The previous mitzvah, nevertheless, in order to strengthen the matter in our hearts, the Torah distanced us from it to this extent. In other words, even though it's repetitious at this point, quite repetitious, the Torah is going to quite a great length because we want to really strengthen this matter, that this was really rushed, and this is what it's all about. On the doorpost?
Yeah.
In Egypt, yes. Afterwards, every year, once they got to Israel, every year, they would do the Paschal lamb and eat it at home. They didn't sprinkle the blood again. They would eat in Yerushalayim. But that the first one was the one they did the blood. Okay. And then he has one more before he starts to explain it, is not to take any of the Paschal lamb outside. Again, he explains this based on the mitzvah number 15 on the back of the page. He explains this based on the again, noblemen versus commoners. He says the miracles of Egypt, we were made into lords. So this mitzvah comes upon the lamb, that it should be eaten in the place where the group is. And in the group, there was a group that would get together and have that meal of this lamb as one. And the lamb was eaten in the house where they were eating and not taken outside. That's what kings would do. Everything is prepared for them to eat in the palace with their large court. Everyone in the palace, the entire household, all the staff, everyone eats in the palace. Anybody who's going to join the king is invited in to eat. And the poor of the land, by contrast, when they prepare a big feast, it's very exciting. And they send portions to their friends. It's something novel, he says. It's something exciting. So they share the meal. The king, he does this every day, and everyone just comes in and eats. That's what you do every day. So to make it as if, so to speak, this is common for us, having great meals, the way of nobility, acting like noblemen, we do not send any of the meal outside. Anybody who wants to join in the meal has to come in and eat it in here. The last one he says is the mitzvah of breaking a bone of the Paschal lamb. And he says the roots of this mitzvah is, again, remember the miracles of Egypt as you've written of the others. There were 2 or 3 others I skipped. It was just, again, it was the same thing over and over, and just to fit it on the page. He said this one is the aforementioned root. It's not dignified for princes and advisors of the land to gnaw on the bones and break them like animals. Like the way when dogs are gnawing on their bones, getting every last morsel of juice out. Human beings aren't so desperate for every last morsel of food. And it's not appropriate to act this way unless somebody is really hungry. The poor of the land who are famished, then it's justified. They need that nourishment to be able to survive. That's normal. But a person who's doing it just for the taste and just gnawing and gnawing and gnawing on the bone the way animals do, that is obviously not dignified, not appropriate. And therefore, we need to act like kings when we're first coming to be the treasure of all the nations, a kingdom of priests, holy nation. And every year at that time, not just the first year in Egypt, every year when we remember this, it's appropriate to do activities which demonstrate for us the great level that we attained at that time. And through the actions and the imagery that we use, we instill the matter in our souls forever. Basically, I have all these mitzvahs focused on the entire night over and over and over, hitting home the message that, hey, these miracles happened, don't forget it, and we were noblemen, and this is great. Yeah. That's a fascinating question. I've never thought about it. my inclination, just running through now offhand without having anything in front of me, running through my memory of the words, which could be wrong. My memory of the text seems like it should be inside, literally in your house, in your dining room. But I don't know. From
It was a special night.
Protection from the angel of death.
Protection from whatever was.
Yeah, the firstborn. Yeah, Hashem was doing it himself. Yeah, from that night, the Paschal lambs were protected them. That the firstborn of the Jews weren't slaughtered. Those who were keeping the mitzvah. So those who didn't. I assume that would be fine. That's where it fits to have the meal in there. I assume that would be fine. It's probably, philosophically speaking, it would make sense to do it in your dining room, which would be in a nice place. But if a person doesn't have space and have a large family coming, I assume it would be fine to do it in the dining room. Practically speaking, at the time of the temple, when we had the Beis Hamikdash, they were doing this in Jerusalem. The vast majority of people were not eating dinner at home that night. They were eating dinner in Jerusalem at whatever inn they were staying at. They were eating it in whatever room, whatever dining room they had available to them. But I do think it was done inside. But the original Pesach hotel. There is a Mishnah that one of the miracles was that everybody always found a place to sleep. One of the miracles that occurred during the temple is that no one ever couldn't find a place to sleep. There always was a room available for everyone, which is a fascinating idea unto itself of how Eretz Yisrael expands to hold the Jews. Yeah. But that it is. Yeah.
The reason for feeding inside is you have to have a protected roof over it. So if you've got an area outside that's got a roof on it, it's attached to your house. Can't you eat in that?
I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. I don't know. Again, the idea was the doorpost. You have a doorpost, whatever's holding up the roof could function as a doorpost potentially, and you could put up a there. I'm not sure. Again, I've never thought about this. This is really off the cuff. I don't know. It's an interesting question, though. Unfortunately, it hasn't been relevant for like almost 2,000 years now. So hopefully, if we merit it, it will be relevant this year, and we can all find out and ask Mashiach. Or Rabbi Slatus might actually know this. You know? He knows these type of random things. But so he follows up here and discusses the question of why do we need so many mitzvahs about the same thing? I'm just going to read straight through the English here of what I wrote. It's my own loose translation, this English, by the way, of the Hebrew on the right-hand side. But he says, don't think, my son, to catch me and say, why is this that Hashem, may he be blessed, should command us to do all these to remember that miracle? Would one commemoration not bring the matter to our thoughts, ensure that it is not forgotten from the heritage of our descendants? Our descendants will remember this forever. We have one commemoration. That's it. We light the Hanukkah candles. We do one lighting of the candles. Each night we light it and we remember it. And that's it. We're done. You don't need numerous activities surrounding the Hanukkah candles. For it is not with wisdom, he says, don't ask this. That is not a wise question. You're not challenging me with wisdom in this. It's a youthful attitude leading you to speak such. This kid was 13, but it's pretty tough words he's hitting him with. And he says, now, my son, if you want wisdom, listen to this, lend your ear and heed. I will teach you what is helpful for Torah and mitzvahs. Apparently, it was an important question, at least. He said, I'm going to tell you something that is much broader than the topic at hand. No, a person is moved in accordance with his actions. The Hebrew word is lispal, which means to be emotionally moved. A person is charged, is emotionally moved according to his actions. His heart and all his thoughts always follow the actions he engages in, whether good or bad, even when completely wicked in his heart. And all the inclinations of his heart are but evil all day long. If he arouses his spirit and places his efforts, his involvement in Torah and mitzvahs with constancy, even if it's not for the sake of heaven, it's just what he's doing, then he will end his evil inclination, he said. He will immediately be turned towards good through the force of his actions and his evil inclination. For the hearts are drawn after the activities. The activities themselves will turn a person, which parenthetically is actually a very important point in Torah Judaism in general. The real work is our own connection with God. Torah and mitzvahs are means and tools that will enhance and direct whatever we're doing to help us do it better. But ultimately, our life is not about the Torah and mitzvahs per se. It's about our connection with God. And that's what really matters. And there are people who can be very religious and not so observant, or very observant and completely irreligious. That they do everything right, but never think about God once in their life. And that's obviously not a good thing. The main thing is thinking about God, connecting with God. The Torah and mitzvahs is a means to connect. And that's what he's saying here. If a person does it, these actions, activities, engaging in them, redirect the heart. And on the flip side, and here he is very cautious in his wording, you see from this just the type of person he was, that he was afraid to speak bad about someone, especially someone righteous. He bends over backwards here. Even if a person is completely righteous, heart is upright and pure, desiring Torah and mitzvahs, if he would possibly engage in folly, as if to say, as a parable, that the king forced him, appointed him to an evil trade. In truth, if all of his engagement constantly, all day is in that activity, at some future point in time, he will leave the righteousness of his heart to become completely wicked. The wicked guy, he was very quick to say, Torah and mitzvah is going to help him and he'll be righteous. The righteous guy, he's very scared to speak badly about someone, but he's very quick to speak kindly of someone turning around and doing well. You get a little bit of an insight into the nature of the man who wrote the book. He obviously was a very kind person. But either way, he will leave the righteousness of his heart completely wicked. The matter is known and true. Every person is moved in accordance with his actions, as we said. Therefore, our rabbis of blessed memory said, the omnipresent wanted to bring merit to the Jews, he therefore increased Torah and mitzvahs for them, in order that we can focus our thoughts on them and fully engage in them, bring goodness for us in the end. Through the good actions, we are moved to be good and to merit eternal life. This is referencing a very broad idea quoted very often in Siyam Mishnayos and other cases, but basically that Torah and mitzvahs is very broad, meaning that almost absolutely anything you can think of to do, there's a law about that. There's a law about how to do it, a law that's relevant. There's some Torah thought that is relevant to absolutely almost anything you can think of doing. So every single thing we engage in at any point in the day, any part of our lives, can be done in a way that connects us with God, can be done in a righteous way, can be done with merit. And God basically set up a world and set up a system where every single waking moment, we can be living a normal life and engaged in Torah and mitzvahs. Living a productive life, doing what we need to do, taking care of our family, taking care of our house, etc., and still be engaged in Torah and mitzvahs every moment of the day. And he did this in order that we have this merit, that we're fully engaged in them, brings goodness to us in the end. And they of blessed memory, the rabbis hinted at this when they said, anyone who has a mezuzah in his doorway, tzitzis with his garment, tefillin on his head, is guaranteed he won't sin. Doesn't mean literally, obviously, he's guaranteed he won't sin. But if a person's thinking about these things, when he's doing them, then he says these are constant mitzvahs, and he's always moved by them. So a person who is constantly engaged in mitzvahs, that is a way to help us move forward, because that's what mitzvahs do. Therefore, he says, as a side point, tells the son, look again and again at your work and your activities, what they are, for you will be drawn after them. You will not draw them and change those activities in your favor. Don't let your soul assure you, saying, if my heart is whole and pure, my faith in God, what loss is there if I occasionally enjoy myself in the streets and alleys, sitting with the people on the street corners, mocking with them, speaking loosely with them, and similar matters where there isn't a guilt or sin offering, nothing that's, forbidden, not to do anything forbidden, but just, hang out in all the wrong places. He says, after all, I also have my own heart. And he uses a rabbinic language here. My small finger is tougher than their thigh, which it's funny because it's like the talk of it's almost like a street thug talk. My finger's bigger than your thigh, but it means the same idea, but it means my willpower, not my physical prowess, but my willpower, my character is stronger than their character. So what do I have to worry about? Hang out with these people. I have my own heart. They do it their way. I'll do it my way. I'll see what they do, and I'll move on with my life. I'm not going to be drawn after them. I have much more character and strength of character than they do. He says, don't, my son, beware of them. Don't do this, lest you're caught in their nets. Many drank from their cup of poison this way. Many people thought that, and they fell hook, line, and sinker, got dragged away from who they wanted to be. Save yourself, he says. And then he comes back to the point at hand. After knowing this, you won't have difficulty now with the abundance of mitzvahs in the matter of remembering the miracles of Egypt. They are a core pillar of our Torah. By abundantly engaging in them, we will be moved to the matter. Be emotionally moved, as we have said. Which basically what he's saying is, in a nutshell, that what we do and what we engage in affects who we are and how we think. And therefore, we have all these mitzvahs this night to have a very heavy dose of it to make sure that we're moved and inspired by the evening. What he doesn't say clearly, and I think is a very important point here, though, in understanding what the evening is about, and he's talking in his lengthy piece to his son about the idea of constancy all year long, what you're doing all day and all year. A person whose every waking moment is involved in this. He's applying it to one night, a few mitzvahs one night. And I believe his point is, I think a very straightforward point, but the idea is that the reason why constantly being engaged changes us is because our actions focus our mind. Our actions drive our heart. The more we do it, the more we feel it. And if you look at the wording he uses in number 8 here, mitzvah number 12, he says, in order to, when he talks about not having any chametz mixtures, even has chametz in it, don't eat it, in order to strengthen the matter in our hearts, the Torah distanced us from it to this extent. And I believe that's the idea he's saying here to his son. The reason we have so many mitzvahs is because we really want to drive this home. We want to make sure that we walk away from the Seder night with a feeling, a sense, a very deep clarity that this happened, this is who we are. Now, if we stop for a moment, though, and look back at what he said, this is why I read through everything he said. He talks a lot about the miracles, the miracles, the miracles, the miracles, the miracles, the miracles. And what he's talking about is the Paschal Lamb, the eating matzah, the eating chametz. You think about what we do at the Seder, there's the leaning, he talked about the nobility, he talked about the haste. There's very little discussion here about, in terms of the mitzvahs, very little practice about the miracles. Now, if you have kids at the table, I know we do this different ways that the kids like to reenact the makos and get all sorts of props and whatnot, and they have their little puppets or different things. And over my mother-in-law's house, they have all the little kids gather under the table and get like bugs and other things, and at least they throw all the bugs on the table, and hail they throw all the like ping pong balls on the table. They have all their fun, but that's not like an integral part of the Seder. That's fun for the kids to keep them up. The Seder doesn't seem to focus on the miracles, which is what he kept talking about. It's to remember the miracles, to remember the miracles, to remember the miracles, to remember the miracle. We're not doing that. If his whole point here is to remember the miracle, then it would seem like we missed the boat. We seem to be focused on, we're focused on the freedom, that's important. That's part of it also. We're focused on the haste, but the message he mentions does not seem to be in sync with the activities that he's discussing. There's something more going on here that he's not telling us. Any thoughts or comments? I've done a lot of talking. Any thoughts or comments before we continue?
Focus on the miracles, not so the activity. Those are all miracles that happen that allowed us to achieve our freedom.
I mean, we discussed them.
So
So we talk about them, yes.
We're remembering them.
Yes, we remember them, we talk about them, but he's saying the reason we have all these mitzvahs, that's an important point. The mitzvah is to talk about it. V'gad zel bincha talks about that later. The mitzvah tell your child what happened, continue the message, remember this, to talk about it. But he's saying all these mitzvahs are to drive the message home, because what you do is what you think about and what you feel and what you focus on. Well, we're talking about the 10 plagues, but we're not, as I said, we're not like reenacting them per se, unless you have little kids there. We're not engaging in it. My mom has another cute trick she started doing at one point. That they at some point during the meal, you have to go around the table. Everybody has to say, if you were leaving into the desert, name one thing you would be sure to take with you. Like stop and think, like they were going into the desert. I mean, they took everything with them. They took the whole Egypt with them. A little bit different, but it just illustrates what it meant to be going into a desert. There's different things that a lot of, you go online, you can find all sorts of Seder games that will help to enhance your Seder and bring it to life. But again, this is things people do now. It's not something that was built into the Seder. The discussion is there, definitely something we're focused on, but he's saying that's the whole point of the activities, and to be active. We're not active in that way. It seems to be, again, that there's something more going on here. Any other thoughts or comments? Yeah, please.
Striking to me. I mean, he's enumerating the mitzvahs of the Torah. I got you. But we seem to have a lot of emphasis on the Pesach sacrifice, and we don't have it. We don't do it now. And he wasn't doing it then. And they thought, so this is a message to the son or his grandson, and he's putting a lot of emphasis on the Paschal Lamb. It's not happening. It doesn't seem that we should bring that anything about. What do we have instead of that? What are we doing instead of that?
I don't know if he mentions that again. Each one there's a lot more. He goes through the laws. I don't know if he mentions it by the laws about the afikomen. That the afikomen is to remember. I don't know if he mentions that, but your point is well taken. They actually talk about that when we get to the afikomen. Many of us, it's the end of the seder. We're tired. We're exhausted. We've already had 2 cups of wine. We're already had the meal, and we're done. And now we have to eat more matzah. So that's kind of our attitude. Is like, that much? Are you sure I have to eat that much? And we managed to do it, and we're eating it and working our way through. And then but really, we should be thinking about the Paschal Lamb when we're eating the matzah. And that's really it's spoken about. It's something that it's something that I think is ultimately his point here for his son. As you know, it was really that son should take these messages on, understand there's a bigger picture here. There is something we can apply, which is important. Again, your point is well taken. We don't appreciate the Seder was completely different. The Pesach preparation was totally different. I mean, everybody was going out of town. The city was shutting down for Pesach. There was no minyan. Any adult male was up in Yerushalayim. And any family member who could travel. I'm saying it was like it was an entirely different experience. I mean, maybe the elderly men were still around, so you had a minyan for them. It probably depended on the city. But and everybody's there. Everybody is having this Korban Pesach. The smell of roasted meat. I'm saying everybody was having a barbecue. That's what you were doing Pesach afternoon. You burned your chametz, you had toast, and then a barbecue. That's what you were smelling all day in Yerushalayim. On Erev Pesach was toast and then a barbecue. This was just what was going on. It was an entirely different experience, which, God willing, hopefully soon we'll experience it again. But it was a very different world. Comments? Huh? You had a comment? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so I would like to suggest, I think if we look, really think about what he's saying and really following up a little bit on what Steve was just asking, I think there's really 3 points that he's really saying here that we are experiencing and focusing on. The Paschal Lamb, again, we don't have it, but what was it? It was a sacrifice. We went up to the temple. We brought this. That morning, everybody's there, shechting a lamb to eat that night. And we're all eating it. It was brought in the temple first, and the blood was sprinkled on the altar, and then we ate it. We're sharing this meal, so to speak, with God. It was an experience of thanking God for something. We're recognizing that there are miracles to thank God for. And I believe the message he's hitting on is not so much the miracles themselves and what the miracles were, which is certainly important and something we need to focus on and a lot to be gained from. But what he's focusing on, I would suggest, is as he says, you look at the first and second, the way he says it is very clear. He did the Exodus from Egypt, and then he says the second one, mitzvah 6, that he did for us, he took us out of slavery. It's not just the miraculous way that it happened, but the miraculous way that it happened and all the miracles involved were a very clear indication that God is taking us out of slavery. And we are where we are, not because we're of noble stock. We aren't kings and princes, etc., noblemen because we're of noble stock, because we're from the house of nobles. We were slaves. We are where we are because God took us out and chose us. And that's what we're focusing on, that there was a miracle, that God is involved in us being who we are. And as he said, and then if you look at I'm sorry, email hand. Well, he says also that he took us out to the we talked about mitzvah number 8 and mitzvah number 7, not eating it raw or cooked, not to leave over any of the Paschal lamb. He keeps saying that it's to remember and still in our hearts. And this time, Hashem may be blessed. At the end of mitzvah number 8, the last line, He redeemed us from slavery, made us a free nation, and we merited royalty and greatness. In the mitzvah 7, he says that we're remembering we went out to freedom to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And he's referencing not just that the miracle happened, but the real idea of a miracle. This is commonly said. The word miracle in Hebrew, nes, literally means a banner. A miracle is not God intervening. Nature, as we know it, obviously is God's controlling the world. He set rules for how He controls the world, and rules that He runs the world by, that we understand and we recognize. And when He changes those rules and manipulates them, it's a banner, it's a sign that the reason the sun comes up is because God said so, not because of gravity. God said there should be gravity, and God set these rules in motion, and that's why they function, because that's how God made creation, that's how God made molecules interact and made gravity work, and that's why it works that way. But the change is the banner, is the sign that God's in control. And the sign of the Exodus is that God is choosing us for royalty. And he mentions that the not eating chametz, he says, is to remember the miracles that we were taken out of Egypt and the manner we were taken out. But specifically, the idea when we don't have any chametz in our possession, that's where he focuses on the taste and not just the miracles, that we couldn't delay. God was in a rush when the time came. He wanted us out. In mitzvah number 11, that's where he spells it out, that it wasn't possible to have leaven. And in mitzvah 12, that to instill this in our hearts, strengthen it, that we're so far away that we should experience that reality that God was in a rush to save us from slavery and make us noble. As bad as the slavery was, and part of that message is as bad as the current exile gets, when God is ready, time's up, we're out of here. And that's what happened then, and that's what's going to happen again. And this is part of the message, is to experience that there was a rush, because God was ready, and God waits on no man. And this is, I believe, what he's really saying. What we need to do is experience not the miracles. Yes, we need to focus on the miracles to understand what God was doing, understand God's involvement. And there are a lot of lessons and other lessons built into the Seder. He's not saying these are the only lessons, but these mitzvahs, the point of it is to experience that we have been chosen and dignified by God for this role and for this idea. And this is what we say, Chayav kol adam, we say this, Chayav kol adam leros atzmo kilu hu yatzam mitzrayim. Each and every person needs to see himself as if he personally left Egypt. We need to experience it to understand that it wasn't just about them, but God is doing this for us. We need to have this message of this nobility and this dignity instilled in our hearts. And that's what we need to experience. And that's why we have also all the laws about exact sizes of how much we're eating the maror, how much we're eating the matzah, how much we're drinking the wine, etc. We need to experience it. Exactly as he says, we need to experience the slavery, to know where it came from, to taste the maror and experience bitterness, to taste the salt water and taste the tears, and to actually experience tears, and to experience the joy afterwards of the freedom, all of it, and the leaning over as we eat and etc. The whole package is to understand and experience that tonight, that night, the night of Pesach, we were chosen for royalty by God. And there's a mission here that we've been given. And the message here, to me, really goes far beyond the story itself, but that every time, if we really think on it, really experience it and instill this in ourselves at the Seder, that we miraculously went from slavery to the ultimate nobility. God, the literal king of the world in every sense of the word king, the king of the kings of kings, he chose us to be his ministers on earth. There is no greater nobility. He chose us. And that's what we need to experience at the Seder. This is the message he's saying of that night that we need to drive home, which means every time we do anything right or hold back from anything wrong, the simplest thing, we eat kosher, we speak nicely, hold back a sharp comment, we help a friend, we say a prayer, eat matzah that night, we keep Shabbos, we make Kiddush, whatever it is that we could think of, anything that we're doing, we are expressing that which we were chosen for, that nobility. That's what we're doing in everything we do the entire year. This is what it means to be a holy nation. And this really is much bigger, I think, than simply that mitzvahs have meaning. And it's much more personal. As it says, we each have to see this in ourselves. There's a fascinating Sforno. He's talking about loaning with interest in this particular context. It's in Parshas Bahar in chapter 25. Number 11 on the sheet is the pasuk where it says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher hotzeiseis echem me'eretz Hashem, your God who took you out of Egypt to give you Canaan, to give you the land of Canaan, to be for you as a God. And the Sforno explains, what does this have to do with anything? Hashem took us out of Egypt. What does that have to do with the laws of interest? That he took us out to be his God, meaning that his intended goal, Tachlis HaMechoven, what God wants from the world, should be attained and achieved through all of us together. That's why he took us out. And therefore, he says, really, it's appropriate that the arrangement of our society, the Seder HaMedinos for us, should be in a fashion that we can live together, and help each other. The reason you're not supposed to lend money with interest, you're supposed to just lend a free loan, is because we should be living in a society. We need each other to accomplish each other's tasks for our task to be complete. Each and every Jew has a unique role to play within the sum total of that holy nation, that kingdom of priests. Whatever the exact role is, we don't know now. We don't have prophets nowadays. We don't know it. But every individual has a unique role to play. And for us to achieve what we need to achieve, God's intended goal is only achieved when we all play our role. So a Jewish society requires that we're all ensuring everybody else is living life okay and helping each other so that we can achieve the intended goal of them doing whatever their life is about. I don't know, but I got to make sure he has bread on the table and that they can function and that their family is okay, that their family can be them. Because by being them and living their life and doing their mitzvahs, whatever it is that they're doing, their connection with God is bringing holiness into the world that is critical for the Jewish package. And I think one of the things we often struggle with in today's world is exactly this message. It's one of those common things, certainly in outreach that you hear, is, Rabbi, what does God care about me? You know, a friend of mine wants to write a book. Rabbi, why does God care if I eat shrimp? He wants to write a book. I don't know what to call the book. So we all struggle with that. And he's saying the Seder is understanding that it's a good question, but God chose you for this. We were chosen for this. And that's a very, very powerful message. Like she would often talk about when Aaron, the first day he was actually serving as a priest in the tabernacle in the desert, which was according to many, the tabernacle was atoning for the golden calf. And he felt extremely embarrassed and ashamed because he was involved in the golden calf. He didn't feel worthy. And he was afraid to come close. And Moshe says, Krav on his back, come close to the altar. And Rashi explains what Moshe was saying was, Aaron, don't be embarrassed. Excuse me, l'kach nivcharta. You were chosen for this role. You have a good question. Why am I worthy? I'm not worthy. I was involved in the golden calf. I can't be the one to lead the atonement. It can't be me. God chose you. You have a good question. Why? Ask God later. There's only one way to ask God now, and that's to leave this earth. Most of us would rather wait to ask God. Until we have prophets, you can only ask him after 120. So I'm going to wait. So I don't know the answer, but whatever the answer is, God chose you. And that's what we're hitting on at the Seder. And it's a very empowering thought. And just I'll end with two brief stories that I think really highlight how empowering this is. Two stories of kindness, but just illustrate how powerful it is about how we interrelate and impact each other, and how powerful just understanding who we are and what we do. There was one of the I'll start with this one because it happened. I'll go in chronological order. This one happened a few years ago. Rabbi Nosson Finkel, who was the Rashiv of the Mir, he passed away a few years ago. He was at the end of his life, many people know, he had Parkinson's, a terrible, terrible Parkinson's. He really struggled. He could not hold himself still. And a student was once there helping him put on tefillin. And it took a half an hour for him to put on his tefillin. 30 minutes, so the story goes. And at the end of this, the student asked him, Shiva, how does Shiva find the strength? Half an hour just to put on the tefillin. It's painful also, it's complicated. He looked him in the eye and he said, because I know that the holiness, the purity that's brought into the world by this old man's tefillin makes a difference in the life of your 2-year-old daughter. So that's what drove him. What empowered him and gave him the strength to push through his Parkinson's was knowing that his mitzvah was helping someone else. He didn't know who, didn't know where. I don't think he meant literally. I don't think he meant mystically. He had some insight that his mitzvah was helping his daughter. But we are interrelated. And whatever we do, every time we push forward just a little bit, whatever it is, that makes a difference. And one of the hostages who was freed, a woman named Sapir Cohen, my wife just showed me last night, there's a video where she spoke, I think it was in Dallas, maybe, I forget, somewhere in Texas or Arizona, I forgot where she spoke. Sapir Cohen, look up her name, Sapir Cohen. And it's a powerful story. She's clearly a very special person. And when she first got there, wherever they took her initially, she was with another teenage girl who was completely broken, understandably, completely broken and bawling and just couldn't function. And she committed to herself that she was going to find ways to be happy no matter what was going on, to be a security for that girl. She had actually just started, for health reasons, she wasn't religious at all. She had started saying chapter, I think she said it was 27 in Psalms, which is apparently a chapter that is a particular prayer for health. She had been saying it for a month prior. October 7th was day 30. And she had memorized it by that point. So she kept saying it every day while she was in captivity. And every day she said she thanked God for 3 things. She thanked God for that chapter that she had. And she would pray that chapter. She thanked God that, and this is strange. She said that not strange, it's powerful because you chilled it. She felt the angels of the prayers of everything. She really only realized when she came out and she saw how many people were praying, but she felt the angels that God was sending to protect her while she was a hostage. She felt that, and she thanked God for all the miracles he was doing for her, and that he gave her this opportunity to be there for this girl, which she said empowered her that she could make a difference. In the midst of this captivity, there was something she could do, and she understood, and she said that as soon as it happened, she saw that girl, she said, God, I know why I'm here, and I'm going to do it. Not an observant woman, but as I said before, you don't have to be observant to be religious. Clearly a very righteous woman. And she and she did this. And she said it was to the extent that one of the terrorists one time drew for her a memorial candle and wrote her name in the candle. And she started getting very upset. What is this? What are you doing? And he said to her that I don't like you. I hate you. You're my enemy. But whenever you're in the room, you light it up. And it shocked her that like the terrorist not only could feel that, but had to express it better. it just blew her mind, like the power that we have. And I believe that is really, this is the message of the Seder, that we are empowered to make a difference. We were chosen, each and every one of us, to have that nobility, not the nobility of royalty, of fancy clothing and fancy garments and all the fancy food and everything else, but the nobility of spirituality, the nobility of character, the nobility of being someone to live up to ourselves and be who we know we can be, and to elevate everyone around us through our own activities. This is what we were chosen for. This is who we are. And this is what we need to experience at the Seder. And that's what he's saying over and over and over, that there was a miracle. It's not about the miracle per se, but that a miracle happened. A miracle happened means God chose us for royalty, and we have a mission. And I believe that is what he's saying, and what he's telling his son is the message of the Seder. Experience our past, inspire your future. Thank you. Huh? Yeah. Which young man?